Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good day, and thank you for joining us today. Our discussion topic today is online education. We want to know who is benefiting from this education. Now, the history of using technology to improve education is very long. The history of distance learning is very long. But there's been a remarkable set of developments in this decade that I think is changing things in a big way. I have with me to help us in this discussion Greg Cotton. Greg is a librarian at Cornell College. And Chris Merrill is the director of the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa. And Tyler Carrington teaches German and German Studies at Cornell College. So I'd like to begin by asking you about your own experiences with online education. We have amongst us people who've enrolled in courses as students, people who've authored courses, people who've delivered courses, people who've overseen the development of such programs. So maybe we begin with you, Tyler,
Sure.
about your experiences with this.
My experience actually began as a student in an online course. In this case, it was a history course, taught completely online, actually. And I had, I think in every way, a very positive experience with that. This was a history course, actually, at the time that I took sort of adjunct to my undergraduate education on campus. Since then, actually, I have found a way to pull in online education, digital tools, apps, online platforms into my language instruction, German language instruction, I think to great effect. So that has been sort of my general experience with it, and overall a very, very positive one. Although I do see some limitations to it, and I'll be looking forward to sort of discussing those.
And I think you've told me that on your own, in your own continuing education, you continue to make such use of such resources as well. Is that
I
right?
do, yeah. So the extent to which I find them useful as a professor in the classroom, I also sort of find it useful for me personally when I am trying to learn other languages or other disciplines I want to sort of bone up on. Online education has been super useful.
Now, Chris, you might have the most experience in terms of developing a program. Could you tell us about what's happening at the International Writers Program?
Well, at the International Writing Program, we have long believed that the internet was created precisely for us because it gives us a chance to be in touch with writers and readers around the world. So we've had for a very long time distance learning classes, which began pairing off undergraduates at the University of Iowa with undergraduates in, let's say, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, to explore American literature on the one hand and Arabic literature on the other. Very fruitful kinds of interchanges. And we have built on that a very robust program that now includes MOOCs, massive open online courses. We just finished How Writers Write Fiction, which had over 12,000 students enrolled. And what we do is we take advantage of the fact that Iowa City is the only UNESCO City of Literature in the New World, and so many interesting writers come through on a regular basis, and we find ways to cajole them into recording craft interviews, craft videos about their work, which form the substance of the classes that we deliver. And what's happened is this is the week that we get all the, I like to call them love notes from our students from all around the world who are thrilled to have a chance to sample a little bit of the magic of the writing, the literary life in Iowa City, thanks to the wonders of the internet.
Now, Greg, who works in our library at Cornell College, also teaches at the University of Iowa and at San Jose State University. Is that right? And so you've told me a little bit about your experience, and you told me about an experiment you did. So I want you to share that with the audience if you remember what we talked about there.
So I had been teaching in the graduate library program at Iowa for, I don't know, 20 years probably. And San Jose State approached me about teaching in their online program, and the same class that I had routinely taught at Iowa. And my first instinct was to say, you know, I work at a small liberal arts college and we are all about face-to-face. And ethically, I don't know if I want to participate in this online thing. And then I, had kind of a come to Jesus talk with myself and said, well, paychecks are nice, so why not give it a try? So that semester, I was teaching the same course at Iowa that they had asked me to teach at San Jose. So I made everything in the course as equal as I possibly could. I gave exactly the same assignments. I gave exactly the same tests. We did the same tools exactly, accessing the same tools the same way. Everything was equal as far as I could make it. When I went to grade, I would shuffle all the papers together so I wouldn't know from where those papers came. And when I did my final grades at the end of the semester, much to my chagrin, the students at San Jose did slightly better than the students at Iowa, leading me to conclude that my physical presence in the classroom was a detriment.
I don't think that's the case.
But it was very interesting, and it really, forced me to come face to face with this this method of delivery, and I'm pretty much a fan of it now.
So I want to say a few words about my own experience and see if this provokes some comments from the rest of you. My day job is teaching computer science. I'm a media personality only at night. and as a student of computer science, a teacher of computer science, I've just been taken away by Udacity, Coursera, edX. I've completed half a dozen courses with Coursera. I've done a similar amount with Udacity now. Udacity has invited me to coach other students through the internet. So I don't have experience developing a MOOC, but I have some participatory experience that goes beyond being a student. Now, the issue that prompted me to propose this topic was I look at this wonderful medium, and I think here is an opportunity to help students who are geographically isolated, to help students who don't have the financial means to come to a university, to access some really high-quality education. I've seen some terrific offerings. But then I think about the amount of self-discipline, motivation, resourcefulness that I've needed to complete these courses. And I wonder if instead of compressing the spectrum of educational achievement, we are stretching it, that the people who are already great learners have now got a new resource that will take them farther ahead. Does this resonate with anybody? Has anybody else thought about these kinds of questions?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is that when the MOOCs first appeared, there was a great fear that this would mean the end of the college classroom, that this was the finale to bricks and mortar. But I found it to be precisely the opposite. We have the chance through the MOOCs that we develop to reach students who will never have the chance to come to Iowa, for example, but who are hungry to learn everything they can about writing poetry or writing fiction, about reading like writers, being in a community of kindred spirits. And we have the chance to make that happen. And I think that's part of our mission as educators. Yes, it's stretching us to thin in certain ways, but it's also making available to heretofore unknown audiences the best of what we have to offer.
What was the form of your interaction with your students, Greg, in this course with San Jose State? So you had recorded lectures, or what other kinds of media did you make use of?
I'm kind of a stick in the mud. I give my students 30 to 40 pages of lecture notes every week.
Okay.
And then we have pretty agile, frequent discussions online, asking questions.
Through typewritten text, or
Yes,
is this voice
yes.
communication?
And then regularly I hold, I'm not even sure what to call them, office hours,
Okay.
Q&A sessions, but a chance for people to actually hear my dulcet tones
Right.
and respond to questions.
That's why you're here,
live.
Greg.
That's right. And because of the nature of the course, then I can also demonstrate the tools that we're using.
Right.
And a lot of times people are hung up on just mechanics. It's not concepts that they're hung up on. So I can show them, well, this is how you do this, and it's right there. I would say this has really informed my interactions with students live. I know it has. I've totally changed the way I would teach a live class now with, physical beings in the room, for the better, I would say. It was my first introduction to the idea of a flipped classroom,
Right.
and I am sold on that. When I've done that with live students, we have much more productive discussions when we meet because I'm following that same model.
And do you do this through Skype or digital video conferencing, or how do you?
A course management system and then conferencing software.
Yeah.
And it's impressive. I've also taught an online class a few years for the University of Northern Iowa. I think it's Zoom that they're
Yep,
using.
yep.
Wonderful, cheap
Yep.
software, and boy, that's
Yeah.
very nice. I have to remember to dress appropriately for that when it's video, but I really like that a lot.
Yeah. Because as you were saying that, I was thinking that I realize now there was a pivotal moment in our development of these online resources. We had brought a number of writers to Fez, Morocco for a symposium. And then we went to Casablanca. And the idea was to bring these 5 writers together with 5 writers in Sarajevo. We were talking about cities. And this was with digital video conferencing, and this was 8, 9 years ago. And there was a tiny little lag right at the very start, maybe quarter of a second, half a second. And in no time, that dissolved. And we were having this conversation, writer to writer, across thousands of miles, talking about, on the one hand, the war and the siege of Sarajevo, and on the other hand, what the American writers had brought to this symposium. And I thought, what luck to be able to have really smart people in conversation, and it feels like they were that we were all in the same room. And I think that's the potential of this medium.
And Chris, in a lot of ways, that's the great potential for languages as well, of course, especially internet world languages, right? And so we can kind of bring the world into sort of the student's living room, or in my case, into the classroom, into this sort of, 20-foot by 20-foot classroom in the middle of Iowa. We can bring in speakers from Germany and German-speaking Europe. We have this sort of whole wealth of cultural material from around the world, and to a certain extent, of course, this is sort of the magic of the internet, of the information superhighway, as it were. But and so that, in particular, in languages, I think that's a super thing. It also offers the opportunity, Leon, sort of to your point about opening up a whole world of educational opportunities to people who aren't in the classroom. One of the things that I am sort of gradually pulling in, I'm teaching right now a German 101 course, and one of the things I'm gradually pulling in, more really than anything else at the student's request, is Duolingo, this app for Android, Mac, all these things that, Leon, I know you have used. I have used for Spanish, for my sort of very poor Spanish abilities, but my students, the other day, I sort of threw out to them the opportunity. I said, what are some other opportunities you'll have to interact with German? And I just threw out Duolingo, and all of a sudden the students said, oh, can we have a Duolingo competition? Who can get the most points in Duolingo? It was this really wonderful kind of sort of value-added part of our person-to-person interaction, which, at least in my view, is the ideal setup, sort of this kind of hybrid online and in-person setup, and I think that's one perhaps of the limitations of a purely online setup in any case for languages, that I'm not sure one can learn. In fact, I was telling my students the other day, I said, you know, trying to encourage them to speak up in class, participate, and I said, you know, I don't know that anyone can learn a language purely in his head without that sort of person-to-person contact, without some sort of instructor sort of eliciting a comment from you, correcting something, or just making you feel eager and sort of hopeful for speaking. What's interesting with Duolingo, for example, is it has this sort of spoken command where it will say, you know, read this following thing aloud, and you repeat back, and it picks it up with the microphone, and then it, you know, ding, if you get it correct. My experience has been, as poorly as I speak Spanish, I've always gotten a ding. And so I think that it does bring outstanding resources to people wherever they are. I think, Leon, to your point, it's probably correct that perhaps these opportunities are not so available as we might dream they are. But I think certainly in conjunction with a live sort of flesh and blood interaction with language, in any case, there's a huge potential.
One of the great appeals to me of this new medium is that much of it is competency-based. That is, I'm frustrated in my college teaching career that I sometimes hear people talk about rigor in the classroom as though a course is rigorous only if you fail 20% of the students. You know, so if I'm an effective teacher, aren't they all supposed to pass? In the online courses I've taken, I've been given the opportunity to retry work until I get it right. In the computer science courses, I write a program. I was very much interested in one of the first exercises. I included within my computer program a little note. I said, is there anyone reading this? And back it came, Pablo in Brazil. He says, hi, Leon, yeah, we've got you. And, so there was a personal connection, but more than that, I had the opportunity to improve that program through 3 or 4 iterations until I met a threshold of success. And on the quizzes I take, they shuffle the questions. I get to try. The quizzes are not for a grade, it's to check my comprehension before I go on to the next step. So if I miss one, I try again, and they make it challenging enough that I'm not just repeating myself. So this is wonderful to take a course in this fashion. Nobody cares whether I take 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or 8 weeks to complete the work. Different students will have different interests, aptitudes, opportunities, and we'll complete it in a different way. So I guess, do you see this changing what we do in our regular classrooms there? Is this also, is this part of the experience for you?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm just thinking, as we were developing the most recent MOOC with NovoEd is the platform that we use, they steered us toward a really interesting course in design. And what I loved about it was that they were eager to see how people from different parts of the world would be able to collaborate and create together, bringing to the table different ideas, different languages, different visions of what the world could be. And that's really exciting. Now, in writing, the race is not to the fastest. So we're not talking about who's going to complete the exercise most quickly or in the most dynamic fashion. What we're interested in is that the students have a chance in watching the videos, in taking part in the discussions, and then in the workshopping of their exercises to see how they might make something a little bit better. And that's what goes on in the more creative disciplines. So we don't get the competence that you need in a computer science class. Is it's a different order in creative writing. So we think of ourselves as inventing a new way to think about this.
Well, another question I came into this topic with was what the different experience might be for people in technical and non-technical fields. So let me just ask quickly. My experience has been with these computer science, mathematics. I took a physics course. The closest I got to the humanities was a course in business on entrepreneurship, okay? Kind of little fuzziness there, but do any of you have a mixture of experience like that that would bridge that gap between the kinds of topics that are graded or evaluated more objectively and others? How would you classify your experience?
I would say mine's pretty middle of the road. What I teach, you know, I often will tell students that there is possibly more than one right answer and there's a myriad of wrong answers.
Okay.
So I can be objective, you know, when I grade things. But the way I structure the course, there's all kinds of opportunity for writing and creative thought. And I think it works really well for that. You know, it's, I think the thing I love most about it is I don't have to try to decipher someone's handwriting. You know, it's all right there in Courier New.
Okay.
I mean, in some ways, languages might seem to be, okay, sort of the humanities pure, but and I don't want to, you know, start a TV9 war here about, you know, prescriptive and descriptive grammar, because I know that's a hot topic for the viewers, but language, of course, that's why in some ways things like an app can work, right? There are a whole host of nuances to language, but there are certain ways to conjugate verbs. There are certain articles and genders of nouns that are correct and that are not correct. And even that spoken element I was referring to earlier, we're sort of speaking into the phone microphone, perhaps that was intentional. Perhaps my poor accent in Spanish was, perhaps they've built that into the software to say, you know what, accent and inflection is actually not a terribly important part of communicating, which is the ultimate purpose of language, of course. So perhaps I'm not giving some of these online platforms enough credit. And language, in some ways, is actually then this sort of interesting mixture of culture and I don't know what else, but culture certainly, and then which is certainly more subjective, perhaps no right answers, and also sort of the mechanics of language, which is perhaps slightly more like a, dare I say it, computer science language.
Well, you might be interested to know one of the competitors to Duolingo is Babbel.
Yeah.
And Babbel's voice recognition system is much fussier.
Ah, interesting.
So one of the advantages of me studying German with Babbel and Duolingo is Duolingo is very generous about evaluating my pronunciation. With Babbel, I've got the iPad in front of me and I'm screaming at this thing. You know, I'm shouting the word 12 times over in a way I never would to you in a classroom.
Right.
Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit in the time remaining about any kind of institutional resistance we have seen. And let me sort of predicate this with a little story, or preface this with a little story. 40 years ago, I was a senior in high school. I took a distance learning course that was offered through public television from Montclair State University in New Jersey. You know, so I write in through the mail. They send me a book. I tune in at the allotted hours. I mail in my assignments. Wow. And the picture of online education then is somebody sitting in front of in a television studio, talking at you for an hour, and an impersonal experience. And when I talk to some of my colleagues, I think they're still stuck on that picture. And that's a starting point for some resistance. It could never affect us. We could never go in that direction. And what kind of resistance have you seen or arguments against this? Does this worry you at all that there is institutional inertia?
I think in my experience, there probably was some initial professional resistance to this. I remember 20 years ago hearing, participating in interviews with people who had earned their degree in library science from online programs, and we said they know the answers, but they don't understand the questions. I think my profession has been very welcoming to this, and I think the results are out there. I'm amazed. You know, I often ask students, set up some kind of collaboration group so you're not working alone.
Right.
And they enthusiastically do this, but they're not at a coffee shop. I've seen, one time I had a group, one student was in California, one was in Eastern Canada, and one was in India.
Mm-hmm.
And they still were a very active, vital group working together.
In my own case, I would say it's sort of an interesting time to be teaching languages, actually, when online courses and to a certain extent digital technology, learning technology, is getting so advanced that, in fact, I wouldn't call it resistance from institutions, but there's a certain appeal to relying solely on these sort of digital and cyber learning methods. I can give an example from, I think it's a college in the Midwest, a small liberal arts college, I think in Missouri, that recently had the idea of getting rid of the language programs and replacing them with Rosetta Stone.
Really?
Rosetta Stone, a great program, of course, super effective. And in my own opinion, I think that's a dangerous move because I don't think that a software, however advanced it may be, can quite replace that live interaction with learning a language. But certainly there is great encouragement from administrations to make use of these kind of, not just distance learning, but digital sort of cyber learning as well. And I wholly embrace those. I think that actually language programs can only gain from those so long as the language programs also remain. And this kind of hybrid approach, I think, actually is an outstanding improvement.
Yeah.
It enhances the educational experience.
Absolutely.
So we're near the end, but a minute or two left. You have traveled widely and talked to people at other universities. Do you see some resistance, or?
Well, certainly there is some resistance, but I will say that last spring I was at doing some work for the U.S. Embassy in Dublin, and we went to a literary festival in Galway. Our poetry MOOC was underway at the time, and in this little town by the sea, 6 different people stopped me at different points and said, I'm in your class.
Cool.
And one of them was a very well-known senior Irish poet, and I thought, what are you doing in this class? You know this stuff. But what he was getting from the videos were new ideas about how he would do his own work. And the University of Iowa has taken the position that we don't seem to want to invest in a huge amount in MOOCs, but we want to invest in those places where we do things really well. And we are the writing university, so it makes sense to do that. And I hope that in time we'll
How do people connect you? They go to the International Writing Program at Iowa? You didn't affiliate with some larger organization that offers MOOCs, or did you?
You can go through iwp.uiowa.edu, and that will take you straight to our distance learning classes and MOOCs. But we are affiliated with NovoEd, which has proved for us to be a really terrific platform.
Well, we're down to just about the end, so I invite you to think if there's a last comment that somebody wants to make here before we sign off. I'm thinking a big topic we've not covered is credit versus non-credit. So, for example, I earned a professional credential through my professional society. It's not doesn't have any academic credit.
I think I would just say that that's one of the really interesting places right now for development as we try to think through what credit or credentialing or badging or certificates might mean, and that's another area to make advances.
Well, I thank you all. We're at the end of our period. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us also.